All right, now you guys can talk. Thanks.
All right, hi guys, and welcome. A lot bigger crowd than we expected, so hopefully everyone enjoys the talk. We're going to talk about rotten potato today, which is kind of a spin-off of some research we had done before called Potato. It was a privilege escalation exploit in Windows. Just by a show of hands, did anyone see that talk? Are they familiar with the exploit? Okay, cool. So a lot of this will probably sound familiar. We're going to review some of the old stuff and talk about where we went with it. Yeah, so this is a little different, and you can read the slide. This is privilege escalation from Windows service accounts up to NT authority system. So who am I? Steve Breen, known as Breen Machine on the internet. I came from a computer science, math, and sort of development background. I did some boring enterprise web app development for a while and kind of got sick of it and went into pen testing, red teaming, security kind of thing. I'm part of the NTT Security Offensive Security Team, also known as Foxglove Security. Most people know us by just a few things we released, a bunch of those Java unserialized exploits that made some people uncomfortable, and the potato exploit. I'm also a freediving instructor and a Canadian, so for all you guys wearing the Blame Canada shirts, you better watch out.
And I'm Chris, better known as Vivalian. I went to school, I did computer science, and I also got my OSCP. I used to be a farmer a while ago, and this is actually what I do now. So I deliver pizzas, actually. But yeah, so yeah, seriously. Seriously. Anyways, so this talk.
So we're gonna get into this and talk a little bit about NTLM relay attacks for people who aren't familiar with them, just to give you some background info because we use them a lot throughout the talk. We get into a lot of detail actually, but then we'll talk about the potato exploit, the original exploit that we had released at ShmooCon earlier this year. We'll talk about Microsoft's response to that exploit. It was a bit of a long time coming. And then we'll talk about Rotten Potato, which is today's exploit, and the code for that should be available about an hour after this talk. And we'll get into some future possibilities of where, if you guys are interested in researching these kind of things a little more, there's definitely some unknowns out there and some cool future work to get into. Before we get started, these exploits, they're not new. They're kind of new to you and new to us as pen testers. James Forshaw did a Black Hat talk, I think it was last year, maybe even the year before, called Social Engineering the Windows Kernel. He talked about everything we're going to talk about today, and just no one wrote like a useful POC for pen testers to use, so none of us really knew about it. He also posted some stuff on Project Zero. And literally, this stuff was outlined, step by step, and anyone could just go do this, but, I'm a pen tester, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it, and we know a lot of really good pen testers, and this just, blew everyone's mind. No one knew how to do this stuff, even though it was totally out there and public for a long time. So jumping right into the background information of NTLM relay attacks for those that aren't familiar. So NTLM authentication is how Windows does, this is how Windows does authentication over the network, or one of the ways that it does authentication over the network. So in this situation, an attacker is, somehow tricked a user in trying to authenticate to the attacker's server. This can happen by just sending them a malicious link, getting them to view a web page that you control, doing some sort of network man-in-the-middle attack. There's hundreds of ways for this to happen, and they're not very far-fetched. Pen testers do it all the time. So you get someone to request a logon to your malicious server, and then you forward that logon request off to another server somewhere in the company or internet-facing, whatever. The way NTLM works is it'll then return a challenge. The challenge is just a number. It's just like a long number. The attacker receives that challenge from the server that he's trying to log into and relays it back to the victim client. Now, this is where kind of the magic happens. The victim client does some crypto magic on the challenge and sends that back to the attacker, and then the attacker forwards that to the server he's trying to log into. That crypto magic that he does on the challenge is what actually logs you in. So using this method, you can log in as whoever your victim user was on the other end to a whole bunch of services like SMB, HTTP. We'll talk a little more about that. Some people think this was patched because Microsoft did release a patch for something related to this in 2008. What they released a patch for was, so you can imagine this situation where the client computer is actually the same computer as the server, and the service on both ends is SMB. So if someone tried to log into my attacker server on the SMB protocol using NTLM, then I tried to relay that authentication back to the SMB, or back to that same computer that tried to log into me to the SMB protocol. That's all they patched. Same protocol, same host, which is it's a pretty narrow case of this attack. Yeah, so there's still plenty of room to exploit this, and we're going to talk about some of that.
Yeah, just so that we're clear, what the patch actually did is basically you relay it back to the host computer. So if I sent you a link and then you clicked on it and then I just relay the hashes back to you and then log in. That's basically all it patched.
So just continuing to talk about this very briefly, this is old, this isn't new. Again, it's from 2001, Serdistic, Call to the Dead Cow. That patch we just talked about was released 7 years after the original exploit, and it was pretty bad. Some of the things you can still do with NTLM relays, you can relay from an HTTP server back to the same host on SMB. That's kind of what Potato did. It did it on localhost. You can also do HTTP on one computer to HTTP on another one. So that actually opens up the possibility for things like relaying to Outlook Web Access, which Zach Attack did. SensePost released a cool new tool called Ruler recently. It doesn't do this now. It would be an awesome thing if someone implemented this, but in theory, I think you might be able to do that with Ruler. And then Potato, which is what we released, it does HTTP to SMB relay on 127.0.0.1. So just briefly, again, reviewing the whole attack, Potato, start to finish, just so everyone's on the same page and knows what we're talking about. So the first thing that happens is we click on the Windows Update button and we try to tell the computer to fetch updates for itself. Windows Update runs as NT Authority System, so very high privilege account. The first thing that it would do is it would reach out to the entire it would do a DNS lookup, and if that failed, then it would reach out to the entire local network and say, hey, does anyone know the IP for the WPAD server? The Potato exploit would be like, oh yeah, hey, WPAD's right here, 127.0.0.1. Then the system, NT Authority System, would reach out, say, okay, I need the proxy config options at wpad/wpad.dat. And we're like, okay, here you go. Proxy, and this wpad.dat that we serve up says proxy all your traffic through localhost. So then Windows tries to reach out to us because it's trying to proxy its traffic through us and get Windows updates. So it goes to windowsupdate.com, whatever, and we're like, oh, you're going to need to authenticate before you can do that. And then it tries the authentication, and we relay that authentication to the local SMB listener and get privilege escalation, and now we're running as NT Authority System. So that was the idea of Potato, and that's what it does or used to do. You have anything to?
Not really.
Okay.
The new version that we're actually we didn't release, but the one that we had come out with actually skips all that stuff. I had actually made a Python version. I think it might be up on my GitHub someplace, but we actually skipped out all of the WPAD and everything else, and what we actually used was DCOM. In one of James Forshaw's original talk, he released a DCOM, we call them triggers, and that's what I actually implemented in Potato, and it was actually 100% stable, totally worked on every version until just recently, actually. But that's basically what it was.
Yeah, so this talk actually was originally, when we submitted it, it was supposed to be this new cool version of Potato that worked on every Windows version and had no delay, and it wasn't complicated, and you could just run the binary and boom, privilege escalation. And then after the talk was accepted, they released this patch at some point, so we had to kind of go find new things and redo and hope everyone wasn't mad at us for it not being the same. But there's still some cool tricks in here. And the reason we talk about this is because what we're going to talk about today actually uses some of the stuff from the new version that we were going to release that never got released. So it's all this DCOM stuff that you'll be intimately familiar with very soon. And again, if any of this sounds familiar to anyone, it's like literally just straight from James Forshaw's Project Zero release. He did all this stuff in this issue that was from April 9th, 2015. So it's all out there. So Microsoft's response, it was kind of interesting because, to that original Project Zero release that they did, they originally told him, we're not going to fix this. This has been mitigated by extended protection for authentication, which is a non-default thing that you can enable, and SMB signing. Those both would have broken potato if you had turned them on. But we find in a lot of enterprises those things are not turned on for various reasons. And so, they told James, and you can go read it online, they said, we're not going to fix this. It's mitigated by these options. Okay, so we go to ShmooCon and we're saying, well, they already know about all this, so we're just going to release POC. And about 6 months later, they changed their minds and fixed it with a real patch. So Potato no longer works, for those of you who don't know. We still get questions sometimes on Twitter and GitHub and all these things. And it actually, the current version that's out online right now does not work on fully patched versions of Windows. And how and exactly what this patch does, we're going to speculate on a little bit. We didn't have time to fully reverse engineer it and find out exactly what it does, but we have some pretty good ideas. We did do some initial testing, and we'll let you know what our ideas are. Yeah, so like we said, so what we were doing before was we were taking local NTLM authentication from the NT Authority system account. It was trying to authenticate to our local host. And we were trying to reflect that back to the local SMB listener to get command execution. That's broken, so what else can we do? So again, we refer back to this issue reported by James. This is all in there. And he says, you can NTLM relay to the local SMB service. That's what we did, and they patched it. He said, you can reflect the NTLM authentication back to a local RPC endpoint and released a POC that did some cool things with symlinks and ended up dropping an arbitrary file in an arbitrary location as system. Super cool, but they patched it. And finally, and this is, it's in that issue, it's just sitting there, and it is the second bullet point in that issue we linked, or we showed on the screen. You can get an impersonation token through local negotiation, and that's all this talk is about. That's all we're going to do with Rotten Potato. We are going to take that NTLM authentication, negotiate it locally, and get a token on the machine as NT Authority system, and then we impersonate that token, and we become NT Authority system as long as we have permission to impersonate the token. So, Chris, if you want to jump in, we'll get into how this stuff is all implemented and how it looks.
Okay, so basically what happens first is we make a CO get instance from iStorage call. And we have to do that first to basically set up the RPC trigger. And this is basically what it looks like. I took it straight from his actual original release and put it in there. So after... so basically what this does is it basically just... We kind of trick RPC into... authenticating to our proxy. So, and this is sort of how it works. So when RPC starts up, it basically makes a few calls, and we can actually set the proxy that we want on it. So it sets up these calls here. This is basically just, setting up the thing for NTLM authentication. So it sets all this up, and this is basically what it looks like in Wireshark. RPC is really kind of complicated, and I didn't want to dig too much into the protocol, so I kind of chose the easy route, but that's basically what it does to set up everything. So once you get that all out of the way, then you can actually have it authenticate to you. So once it starts the authentication, what we do is it's still forwarded to our proxy, and we actually listen on port 6666. And the first hash comes across the wire, and what we did in the original one real quickly was we actually just forwarded it to SMB. But for here, what we do is we make a call to accept security context. And we just take that hash and we put it into accept security context. And at the same time, we also relay that back to RPC itself on port 135. When you do that, it will actually generate the second hash, the NTLM challenge. and it's sent back to us. And what we do is when we call accept security context, we actually it'll give us a second hash, the same NTLM challenge, and we actually replace that inside the RPC packet structure. So we don't have to forge our own RPC packet at all whatsoever. We send that back, and then we get the hash 3, and when we get the hash 3, we send it right back into accept security context, and that's basically it. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what happens. But we'll go into a little bit more detail here. So this is how it looks on the wire, in Wireshark if you're sniffing localhost, and you can actually see on the port numbers where it goes to 6666, and then we just forward it right on to 135.
Yeah, you can see it's the same packet. Like you can see, so a packet comes into 6666, that's the NTLM type 1 negotiate packet. So the system service wants to try to negotiate NTLM with us, and we're like, okay, we forward that over to 135, and the only reason we're doing that is just so we can get the packet back to use as a template to reply to RPC. That's the whole reason we're doing this, because we didn't want to figure out how to write these RPC packets from scratch, so we just use we just have Windows generate them for us and use them as templates and just replace blobs of bytes inside them, the NTLM blobs. We replace those as we go. So really that's all we're doing. And you can see it in Wireshark. You can see like how whenever we get a packet, we forward it off, we get another one back, we might replace a few things in it, and then we forward that on to the guy who's trying to authenticate with us.
Just a quick thing to note is that the blobs are actually, if you enable signing or anything like that, the packet structure itself isn't signed at all whatsoever. So you can just replace them. It's really simple. So this is what it looks like. When you trick DCOM into authenticating to our proxy, which we have on listening on port 6666, right? It will actually send the first NTLSM negotiate packet. And this is what it looks like. Now, a local call, which you guys probably haven't heard of, maybe you have. I hadn't, and I looked everywhere. What determines a local call is actually this workstation name and the domain name, and that's the only thing. And you don't have to do this locally either, which I found kind of funny. You can do it remotely too. So we take that, and that's basically the only thing that determines a local call, and we feed it right back into, first we have to call acquire credentials handle, and that's just the way that these calls work. You have to do this, it's on the MSDN. This is what the call looks like. It looks complex and everything, but we use a really simplified sort of version in Potato that makes everything real easy. After you call acquire credentials handle, you have to use that handle that you get to put it into accept security context. And so you put that handle in there, and you put the NTLM first packet, which I call hash 1, right into the accept security context call.
Yeah, you get, so where it says DCOM over there, that's DCOM talking to your listener, your proxy on port 6666. It sends you some packet, and inside that packet there's an NTLM blob. You rip that out, and you just throw it into the Windows API call to accept security context. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, honestly. This is what the call looks like. It looks kind of complex. But it's not really, honestly. So once you get that, you actually get out the second hash, the NTLM challenge, and we take that, and we had already had the RPC had already responded to our proxy, and so we just take in, rip out that challenge, and we replace it with our own. Now, for a local call, it is a little bit different, and you have this little reserve section here. And this little reserve section kind of threw me off because I was like, what is that? And so I finally figured it out, and what it is actually the security handle itself is transmitting it right through the packet. And this is what the actual, it's the DW upper part of the security handle, and it's just basically a place in memory.
So yeah, it's weird because it goes over the network and it gets passed to the loopback adapter, but it's actually a reference to something in memory on that machine, so it can kind of throw you off a little bit, but that's all it is.
So we send that the NTLM challenge back into the DCOM service, and then that will basically respond with the third hash, the NTLM authenticate, and we take that, and it's actually quite a bit different because everything in it is null. It's all zeros, and I mean there's nothing there basically. And this is how a local call works on every single Windows version that I've ever seen. So, and then we just take that and we put it right back into accept security context, and that's that's basically it. It's quite simple.
Everything on the left you see, that's the NT authority system, like super user, super high privilege account on the Windows box trying to authenticate to us. We're just relaying all the authentication information to Windows API calls, acquire credentials handle, then accept security context a couple times, and that's how you locally negotiate the NTLM handshake.
And we have to call accept security context again. That's just the same call. So after that, it's pretty simple. It's actually really quite simple. All you do is we just call impersonate security context with a security handle that we had from accept security context, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
And now you can actually take that and you can actually pull out a token from it. It's quite simple to do that, but there's really no reason to do that when we can just impersonate the security context itself. And you can actually impersonate the security context as a normal user as well. But unfortunately, when you do that, it drops to an identified token. And there's multiple levels for the token and everything. If you want to find out more about that, obviously watch Forshaw's talk. He does a whole talk on that.
What Forshaw did was he said he was looking for exploits in Windows drivers and like Windows itself. And he was looking at, okay, like if I have an identify token, are there any things that that I can use this for that forget to check if the security level of tokens identify, because there's different levels to these tokens. If you have an identify token, you can say, hey, I'm at the NT authority system, and things will believe you, but they won't let you do like security, anything that would require NT authority system privilege. They'll just say, oh, okay, hey, like they let you say that, but it doesn't matter. But some places, he found that some places weren't actually verifying that, so those were like in themselves completely different exploits. And the interesting thing to note here is this is totally intended Windows behavior. This isn't like an exploit or some crazy thing. This is how Windows is supposed to work. If your account has impersonate privilege and you have a token for a user, you're supposed to be able to impersonate that, even if that token is a higher privilege account than yours. Because, for example, if you're running an IIS application that a user logs into it with NTLM, and the user happens to be a really high privilege user, your application may need to get that user's privileges temporarily to do something on the domain. That's just how it works. So you can't really change that. That's how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, if we're able to get a token for something high privilege like system, then we can impersonate it. And where this comes up in pen testing scenarios, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this. It's you pop an IIS box, you pop a SQL server. You somehow get dropped into like network service somehow. It happens all the time. It happened 2 weeks ago to our buddy OJ, and you can end up stuck there if you don't have some way to elevate your privileges. But those accounts all have impersonate. They all have the impersonate privilege, so you can run this exploit from if you have any of those accounts.
So yeah, unfortunately, you do have to have SE impersonate, but like you said, just about all service accounts pretty much have it. And this is, once more, this is the intended behavior. This is how Windows works. If it's, for instance, say, Microsoft were to remove our decom trigger, or any trigger that we have. We actually have quite a few of them now in Potato. I think there's up to 4 different triggers. If they were to remove any one of those, this will still work for years and years and years to come, I believe.
When Chris says a trigger, he's talking about like the decom thing. We call that a trigger. It's like something that causes it to causes some system service to NTLM authenticate to us. There are other ways to do that don't involve using decom. And in the original Potato, we use WPAD, but there are also 3 or 4 other ways that are not too hard to figure out. And I think a few of them are public. It's not that hard.
Yeah. So I think it's demo time. Yeah.
All right. So we were going to do live demos. But I think we're just going to do the videos right now, just for safety's sake. Okay, I'm going to go back.
Just for the record, I told him to do the live demos, so.
Yeah, I didn't want to deal with my VMs and stuff. Yeah. Is that too hard to see? Okay. No. Is that better? What? Can you read the text?
Yeah, you can read it. You're in the front row. Just explain it. You're good.
Okay. I don't think I can zoom in on this because it's a video.
Yeah.
No, don't do that. It's not gonna do it.
You sure? I'm going to try it. No, it didn't do anything. Okay, so what we have set up here for those who can kind of see the blurred lines, all it is a Metasploit interpreter listener listening for a shellback, and I use the web delivery payload. So over here I have an ASP shell on an IIS box, and I just pasted in that PowerShell string for web delivery. So I'm going to get a interpreter shell as the IIS service account, and that's on the way, coming through. Yeah. Okay. So now we're interacting with the. I'm going to pause it for a sec. We're interacting with the shell. If you can't read that, it says server username IIS app pool / default app pool. You can ask the guys in the front row if you don't believe me. So we're going to do get privs, and we see the list of privileges that account has. So it has SE assigned primary token privilege. Now we've been talking a lot about the SE impersonate privilege. I'm pretty sure that privilege includes SE impersonate, so that you won't always see SE impersonate listed explicitly. The ones that we did testing on here on both IIS and SQL Server have this other one instead, but it still works. So now we're going to upload a binary to the box. And it would be awesome if this was an interpreter post module. We're working on that with OJ, but it's not there yet. So I'm just dropping it in C:/users public. Oops. Okay, so next, hopefully you guys are familiar with the incognito module in Meterpreter. It lets you impersonate tokens on the system. So the executable is going to locally negotiate the NTLM authentication and create a token, but we need a way to impersonate it. In our binary, we obviously could have had it do something like spin up a new Meterpreter shell with the new privileges, but instead we're just going to use incognito to grab that token that is now has been negotiated. So before we run the exploit, we use incognito, and just to prove that we're not cheating, we do list tokens -u. So this is going to list the tokens that are currently on the box that we are able to impersonate. And if you look at the tokens in that list, we have IIS app pool, default app pool, which is not going to get us anywhere, and NT authority /I user. So there's no NT authority system token there right now. So here we're running the binary, and all you have to do is run it, no flags, no crazy parameters like the original potato. And now you can see that I listed the tokens available on the system again, and now there's an NT authority system token available for impersonation. So we're going to impersonate that token. And it looks like it worked, but we do get UID, and now we have NT authority system privilege on the box. Thank you. It's important, you might have noticed that I kind of was typing furiously there, trying to do it quickly. It's because in the current implementation, the token can expire if you don't move fast enough. So just keep that in mind, because if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't always. It should work on every version of Windows, and if it doesn't, then it's a bug in our code or something like that. There's no problem with the technique itself. I'll let you take the next one, Chris. Sure. This one's. Let me open it up for you. So we're just going to show the same thing, but with SQL Server this time.
Yeah. So this is just SQL Server.
Full screen. You want me to do it, or you good? Yeah, you good.
This is just SQL Server, and it just uses XP command shell to pop a shell. And it's basically the exact same thing, really, that we did just before. One of the things is, real quick, you should probably, before you do anything else, you can actually see the get privs here, and it doesn't actually list SE impersonate, but it's there. And I believe anytime you have a assigned primary token privilege that you actually have SE impersonate too. So even if it's not listed there, it still obviously is going to work. And then we upload it. We upload the binary to it. Now you could probably drop it into memory, which is fine. And there is one other thing to note real quickly is that you should actually load incognito first, just in case it doesn't work or something. And so he would load incognito, listen to the tokens just to see what's there, and obviously there's nothing. So we run the binary here, and type it kind of slow here.
Yeah. I miss it.
Yeah. So we just execute the binary we uploaded, and it's going to actually do everything that we talked about before, get the token, and then just hold it right there, and we list it, and then impersonate it, just the same thing as before. And then, of course, we're going to become entity authority system. And one more time, just so that everybody's clear here. This is actually going to work for some time to come. This is the intended behavior. And I'm not sure why. I've looked, and I've never seen anything about this before online. And I was kind of astonished on that. I mean, this is how it's supposed to work. So if you pop an IIS server or an SQL server, it's designed to have these privileges. So you're designed to be able to do this. So this will be around for quite a while. So anyways, our future work is obviously a lot of reversing of the original patch. We do have some ideas. There's some signing involved, which we believe that they made mandatory. I believe that they made mandatory. But they've actually, funny enough, released 2 more patches since then to actually patch the patch that they did because people were getting blue screens and such. So there's obviously a lot of reversing work to do, and I'm not the best reverser in the world at all.
If any of you guys are Windows admins, there was a problem with blue screens when you were using SMB after that original patch, and there was a problem where you couldn't edit GPOs under some really common circumstances. So that's what and Microsoft just released a new patch like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and they actually had to re-release it too because it was a fail.
Oh, yeah, so there's still patches coming out for this type of stuff. Yep. But so what we're talking about here is this is the stuff that fixed the old version of Potato. So we're still not completely convinced that that's hopelessly broken. It's just broken for now.
Yeah. And then obviously we can look at other things to use the anti-authority system against. There's probably quite a few other things that we just haven't even really bothered to look up. More ways to get the tokens, more triggers. There's plenty of those. I don't see any of them really going away anytime soon. But, this might get patched. And if it is get patched, if there's any Microsoft people in here, you could give us credit for it. That'd be great. But anyways, obviously implement it as an MSF module or Metasploit module, which shouldn't be too hard. And then if you want to talk about that, connection hijacking.
Some of the stuff we saw here, like SMB connection hijacking, was kind of a cool thing that we saw where if you have two, if you open up an SMB session to get a file or something, and then you open up another one with the same account on the same computer, sometimes it won't try to re-authenticate. It just uses the same SMB connection. There might be some ways to abuse that. We haven't really thought it through all the way yet, but it's something for the future. Those are some of the more interesting things you could do. Other things would be just trying to, escalate to the point where you going from a normal user to a service account, like on the machine. So if you can do something to become IIS or SQL if you're on that machine, or even maybe if you're on a workstation, there's things you could do. So that is pretty much it for the presentation. We do have some extra time, so if anyone has questions, feel free. The code is going to be available probably within the next hour or two at this link here. We're putting it on the FoxGloveSec GitHub account, but Chris wrote pretty much all the code for the new version.
Feel free to hit me up on Twitter and ask me any questions that you want. I'm more than happy to go over anything. And you obviously had a question there, so.
I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I would be kind of surprised if you would, though, because that's, like if you have an IIS box or a SQL server, it's probably doing impersonation of user tokens all the time, or it could be. It would be pretty normal for that to happen. So this would just be kind of another token impersonation that would do. I don't know how that would show up. That would be something worth testing. I really don't know. Yep.